I was a kid in the 1980s, and one of the cars that I remember best from those years is a Volvo 240. Do you know it was in production until the early 1990s? Anyway, today I'm driving what I guess could be called the 240's great grandson, and that's the Volvo V60.
Volvo V60 is a compact executive estate. It competes against the likes of Audi A4 Avant, BMW 3 Series Touring, or Mercedes-Benz C Class Estate. V60 is the largest of the bunch, has the longest wheelbase and the largest boot capacity. Bear in mind, at the time of recording, we're still waiting for release of the G21 3 Series specs. Design should not come as a surprise. V60 is a scaled-down V90 with signature T-shape LED day-running lights. Compared to the previous generation, the new V60 is more masculine, I think. It looks more like an estate. The V60 is yet another Volvo built on the SPA, or Scalable Product Architecture platform. SPA also means no surprises as far as the powertrain is concerned. Several years ago, Volvo announced all its cars will be powered by 4-cylinder petrol or diesel engines, which will differ only in power output. Therefore, T or D, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 signify power output, not, for example, the number of cylinders like it was in the past, and T8 is now reserved for PHEVs.
This is a D4, or a 190 horsepower diesel, if you like. Now, looking under the bonnet, you can see that V60 is obviously smaller than the V90 because this engine just fills the entire engine bay. And if you look under the bonnet of the XC90, for example, this engine, which is pretty much the same engine, it'll just drown in it because the engine bay is huge and the engine looks tiny.
The V60 interior is, you've guessed it, similar to what you've seen in other Volvo models in recent years. Do I like this unification? I'm sure it's cheaper, unless of course it's not to your taste and you cross Volvo off your shopping list. I recently heard a long-time Volvo owner complain the new interior is, I quote, too Chinese, whatever that means. At the same time, she said she wants to buy a Tesla now. Like it's not based around a huge tablet. Maybe she was just looking for an excuse.
I like Volvo interiors. They are simple, elegant, functional. The infotainment interface is relatively easy to use. I'm not a fan of the instrument cluster, but as long as I can see my average fuel economy and information from SatNav, I'm fine. Speaking of SatNav, Apple CarPlay and Android Auto are optional. Interestingly enough, once connected, Android Auto is displayed only on the bottom half of the screen, which gives you quicker access to the car options, like this here. Now, it's a shame that navigation, Google Navigation, is not displayed between the dials, like in Honda CR-V, for example.
Volvo V60 may be the largest in its class, but it's also the heaviest. It weighs good 200 kilograms more than the 3 Series Touring, which happens to be the lightest. It takes less than 8 seconds to reach 100 kilometers per hour from standstill. It matches Audi A4 Avant time, but Mercedes and BMW are slightly faster. All cars have around 400 Nm of torque and all claim to use less than 5 liters per 100 kilometers combined. That's around 50 mpg US.
This, of course, is NEDC. According to WLTP, or the new real-life test cycle, let's call it, Volvo should use more like 6 liters per 100 kilometers. That's about 40 mpg. And I can believe it. I drove V60 mostly around the city and I got about 8, which is 30 mpg, I think.
The 8-speed auto changes gears fast, the engine pulls from low revs, so V60 D4 feels even faster. However, despite staying in low revs most of the time, the engine sounds rather rough. Good news is, at higher speeds, you can't hear it.
Steering ratio is 16.2 to 1, that's pretty direct. For reference, M3, BMW M3 has 15:1 steering ratio. Just to remind you, I'm talking about the number of degrees you have to turn the steering wheel to get the front wheels turning by 1 degree. So obviously the lower the degree here, the more direct the steering, and usually cars have about 20:1 steering ratio. The V60 doesn't have any of that disconcerting vagueness around the center, which can be felt in the F33 series or W205 C Class.
Suspension is on the firm side and 19-inch rims don't help. Unless you live somewhere where the roads are perfect, I suggest you stick to the 18-inch wheels, which are standard on the inscription trim.
The seats. I know Volvo seats are considered ergonomic, best in business and all that, but I think they're a bit too hard. Now, maybe the Swedes like their wooden chairs and things, but I would like just a little bit more padding.
And since this is a Volvo, it's full of safety systems and driver aids. A few years ago, I first experienced semi-autonomous driving in an XC90. Today, these types of systems appear also in other brands, but they still cause quite a stir among viewers.
I understand how some people may be concerned that one day we will not be allowed to drive, we will just sit inside some programmable tins, which will take us to wherever. But let me play the devil's advocate here and explain why I like semi-autonomous cars, and I can't wait for fully autonomous cars to finally arrive.
Life is not all twisty mountain roads. It's thousands of kilometers on motorways, hours spent in traffic. It's time we also spent with the people we love. Sometimes it's a pleasant conversation, and sometimes it's stressful because we've had a bad day at the office or the kid failed a test. We're tired and we really don't need more stress caused by the never-ending chain of cars.
In a situation like this, I like to hand over to systems programmed to deal with mundane tasks. I mean, do you like vacuuming, or do you prefer to let your Roomba do it?
Pilot Assist 2 doesn't need to trail a car to assist with steering. The car can now drive in semi-autonomous mode up to 130 km/h. It brakes and accelerates to a speed you set. It's not an ideal solution, and there are systems which work better, like BMW's Traffic Assistant, which I showed you recently in the new X5 review. Still, it's a huge load off, more comfort, and if I want to take control, I can always turn Pilot Assist off. But the V60 is an estate, so it's supposed to be a practical family car. Let's see how practical it is. Volvo V60 has the biggest boot in its segment, at 529 liters to the window line and 1441 liters with the seats in the second row folded. There are buttons on the right side to fold the seats. Disclaimer: if you specify optional mini spare, you lose underfloor storage and the boot volume falls below 500 liters to where the competition is.
My favorite feature in the boot is this, let's call it cargo stop. It's simple and it's practical. However, the boot cover is cheapity cheap and a bit fiddly to use, especially if one of your hands is busy with your shopping, kids, pets and things. Okay, now it works. You can also theoretically open it like so and then attempt to close it. I don't like it. And perhaps if there is no electric boot cover option, because there is none, perhaps Volvo could have gone the way that Mazda or Skoda went and just make a longer boot cover, attach it to the boot lid, and that would make things a bit simpler. There's decent legroom in the back, headroom less so. There is a huge tunnel running through the middle, And the armrest is rather wide, so I guess Volvo assumes nobody's really gonna sit here. It's just for two adults to rest their arms comfortably, which is what armrests are for, actually. Now, there are these big cup holders here with soft rubber finish, so you can put here smaller drinks and larger drinks as well, and they will all fit and be nice and snug here. So that's good. I really like that Volvo left this smartphone cradle, I guess, what you want to call it. Unfortunately, Volvo didn't think of charging my smartphone, because instead of at least 2 USB ports in the back, we've got one 12-volt socket. This is so 2000.
Volvo V60 prices start at €37,500. This is more than the competitors, but they offer less powerful and sometimes smaller displacement engines as standard. Compared to 2-liter diesel cars with around 190 horsepower, Volvo comes out the cheapest. That said, this car is spec'd out for more than €65,000, comparable to a C Class Estate I tested a few years ago.
Speaking of the C Class, I recently said you really need to go to town with a car like this to make it feel premium. And this test Volvo here is exactly that. It feels premium, it's got the tech, it's got the comfort, it's got the power to make you feel special. I'd probably choose the all-wheel drive model or even the cross-country version, but until I get my hands on the new 3 Series Touring, the V60 is my favorite estate in this segment. And what do you expect from an estate car? Let me know in the comment section below. Subscribe if you haven't. Join me for new reviews every Friday. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.